There are many complications associated with wristwatches, but none are as useful and popular as the chronograph. We time pretty much everything: racing, sports, meetings, events, so there's always a need for a simple and functional way of timing something. Nowadays, we can use our phone to time things. Chronographs actually remain pretty popular. So here are 14 of my favorite chronographs you can buy right now. Hi, I'm Craig, founder of Wrist Enthusiast. Today I thought I'd take the opportunity to look at some of the best chronograph watches on the market right now. But first, let's define exactly what a chronograph is. A chronograph is a watch that not only tells the time of day, but has a stopwatch functionality built into the watch's movement. A chronograph will have its own sweep seconds hand that moves independently of the watch's seconds hand to help time things. Most chronographs will have subdials that also record the minutes and hours when the chronograph is running. Now, before I get into the list of my favorite chronographs, I just wanted to remind you that if you've been enjoying my content and want to see more of it in the future, don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. I'd love to have you as part of the Wrist Enthusiast community. So let's get going on the list of my 14 favorite chronograph watches. The Daytona has long been heralded as one of the most important chronographs for serious watch collectors, and it's hard to argue with that sentiment. Rolex has been making chronographs since the 1930s. The brand has had a penchant for sport watches even before then, but it wasn't until 1963 before Rolex launched the reference 6238, the first chronograph Rolex produced with a tachometer on the bezel. Originally, Rolex called this watch the Le Mans until about 1965 when Daytona officially appeared on the dial. The watch is named after the Florida city that houses the famous Daytona National Speedway and has firmly rooted the Rolex Daytona as a racing chronograph. There have been many models produced since 1963, and the Daytona is arguably one of the most talked about watches on the market. And recently, we have seen multiple of Paul Newman's own Daytonas sell for staggering amounts at auction. Overall, it's hard to argue with the crown and perhaps its most recognizable Rolex on the market. If you can find one, you can pick up a Rolex Daytona at retail for $15,100, but it sells for well over that on the secondary market. The next choice on our list is also one of the most identifiable chronographs on the market, and that would be the Omega Speedmaster. And all of us at Wrist Enthusiast are really big fans of the watch. The Speedmaster was first introduced into the marketplace in the late 1950s. Omega had been the official timekeeper of the Olympics since the 1930s, and a practical and easier to read chronograph was extremely helpful to time races and events. A stopwatch was traditionally used, but it was a whole lot easier to put a watch on the wrist instead of holding and potentially losing a stopwatch. While the Speedy was used earlier during the Olympics, NASA had created a meticulous testing strategy for chronographs, and the Speedmaster at that time had upgraded to the Caliber 321, which featured a vertical clutch and thus was selected as the watch for NASA. Once that happened, Omega added professional to the name, and the Moonwatch was born. When it comes to history and utility, the Speedmaster Professional clearly belongs on our list of chronographs. You can pick up the Omega Speedmaster starting at $7,000, and it goes up in price depending on the configuration. IWC has long been known for their lines of pilots watches with incredible legibility and a more militaristic minimalism. They've been producing pilot watches since the 1930s, so naturally I featured one of my favorite pilots watches on the list with the IWC Pilots Watch Chronograph. I like it so much that I even bought an older gold version of it. The watch comes in an oversized 41mm stainless steel case on a tapered leather strap or a stainless steel bracelet. It's really the classic IWC look in a chronograph package. The watch also features the brand's in-house Caliber 79320 movement that features a fantastic 44-hour power reserve. It really is a solid reserve for a chronograph. You can pick up an IWC Pilots Watch Chronograph for $7,600. There are a few chronographs that I would call iconic, but the TAG Heuer Monaco is definitely up there. The watch is identified by its unique square case shape. The watch wasn't an immediate hit, but it did catch on in racing circles. The Monaco is aptly named after the territory of Monaco, where the Monaco Grand Prix Formula One race is held. But it wasn't until Steve McQueen wore the Monaco in his famous Formula One movie Le Mans that it really rose to fame. Since so many Formula One lovers and car enthusiasts are also watch collectors, the watch became an icon in Formula One races and in the watch community. I love it for its history and because it's a little bit different of an option when it comes to chronograph watches. That's why I decided to include it on this list of best chronographs. Price for the TAG Heuer Monaco is $7,800. The AORUS Diver 65 Chronograph is a retro-inspired chronograph diver that while the watch only carries 100 meters of water resistance, that really should be more than enough for anyone besides a serious scuba diver. I particularly like the vintage lume on the hands and hour markers, and even subdial hands, that AORUS matches with a gold coin-edged bezel, which is a nice touch. At 43mm, the Diver 65 Chrono is not a small watch by any means, but it's still pretty wearable. And at $4,300 on leather and $4,500 on steel bracelet, the Diver 65 Chronograph won't break the bank compared to some of the other luxury chronographs on this list. And it also offers a sleek alternative to some of the bigger brands. While this one might be a bit controversial for some people, the Patek Philippe Nautilus Flyback Chronograph, reference 5980, is among one of my favorite chronographs on the market. It's big, it's heavy, and it's solid rose gold, which makes it loud. The 5980 is a watch for the self-assured and will absolutely catch the eye of anyone in the room, anywhere. The Nautilus Flyback is defined by its central chronograph function. Patek has combined what's typically 3 subdials into one at 6 o'clock. This allows the chronograph function to operate inside of itself, and I actually find this quite unique in the chronograph world. All in all, it's a super refined watch that I absolutely love, even in its very expensive $108,820 price point. The Zenith El Primero was arguably the first automatic chronograph wristwatch on the market, though there is some debate. The brand started development of its automatic chronograph in 1962 and released the watch in 1969, and it's been advancing and getting better ever since. The Chronomaster Sport El Primero does look a lot like a Rolex Daytona, and many will compare the two stylistically and historically, since Rolex used the El Primero movement in a number of Daytona models. However, the Zenith has a leg up on Rolex in one aspect, and that's that they're available. You can actually go out and buy an El Primero without waiting on a massive list. Overall, it's a solid option for a fair price at $11,000. There are so many flavors of the Royal Oak that it can almost be daunting to find the right one. Of the non-offshore chronograph models, I have found that the 38mm stainless steel Royal Oak chronograph, reference 26715ST to be specific, is probably my favorite. Audemars Piguet has long refined the Royal Oak over the years, but I feel that the smaller 38mm model is the most refined yet. Smaller size than the typical 41mm chronograph just wears better, at least on my 6.75-inch wrist. The watch comes with either a gray or blue dial and retails for $36,200. Tissot has really raised their game recently, especially with their vintage-inspired PRX line. While you can read our full review of the PRX chronograph on our website, link is in the caption, I found the PRX chronograph to be a really solid entry into the steel watch world without breaking the bank. The watch is offered in a few different dial colors and configurations, but I find the Panda configuration to be the most attractive. Tissot opted for a silver dial instead of the standard white dial you typically see on a Panda dial, which is pretty unique. The hands and indices are also rose gold, adding a touch of class to the watch. At just $1,895, the Tiso PRX chronograph is an affordable Swiss chronograph that stacks up well against its pricier competitors. When it comes to design, finishing, and innovation, few are on par with Lang and Sona in the industry. The German watchmaking brand features some of the most technically innovative marvels with some really unique dial layouts. In the case of the Datagraph UpDown, I found that it really exists in a class of its own as far as finishing and design. The watch measures in at an incredibly wearable 41mm by 13.1mm in platinum and is identified by two major features, the movement and the dial configuration. For starters, the in-house movement features a vast number of decorated components and bridges that is truly unmatched. It also allows for cool functions like a flyback chronograph, a jumping minute, and a Datagraph analog date display. On the dial side, the unusual configuration puts the subdials just under the 3 and giving them an ultra-legible look while maintaining their oversized nature. Price for the Datagraph UpDown is $87,000. Breitling, and specifically the Navitimer, have such a rich aviation history that it would be impossible not to include it here. Breitling introduced a slide rule bezel in the 1940s, which allows the chronograph to track speeds and distances in the air. What followed was the Breitling Navitimer. Now, a more obviously modern version is in the brand's catalog, and it has a ton of different color and size options for both men and women. The brand has also created an almost dizzying amount of novelty Navitimer models that fit into any wardrobe, so you can be sure that there's really a Navitimer for everyone. Price for the more traditional Navitimer is $9,700, but there are a number of cheaper and more expensive options depending on how you configure it. Over the last few years, Wrist Enthusiast has repeatedly featured different versions of the Tonda in our watch buying guides. Why is that? We think Parmigiani Fleurier hit it out of the park when they released the Tonda in late 2021. In our view, an instant classic, the Tonda PF Chronograph features a matte guilloche dial that is replicated in the inner circles of the subdials. This adds some cohesiveness to the dial and gives it an overall cleaner look. All Tondas also feature a fluted bezel, but this is no Rolex retread. The Tonda's fluting is much finer than that of Rolex and pairs well with the dial pattern. At 42mm, the Tonda PF Chronograph is a little larger than some other chronographs in the same category, such as the Daytona. But for those that don't have the appetite to wait for a Daytona or Royal Oak chronograph, the Tonda is a welcome addition to the luxury steel chronograph category. Price for the Parmigiani Fleurier Tonda PF Chronograph is $31,700. If you followed us for a while, you know that we are big fans of the style and affordability of Brew watches. And many of Brew's watches have a vintage fused with modern aesthetic. With the metric, Brew watches really embraces the 1970s style with its square case shape and retro chronograph color scheme. The teal, orange, and mustard yellow details on the dial take you back to the bygone eras. If there is one brand doing vintage-inspired watches in a fun and unique way, it's definitely Brew. You can pick up the Brewmetric Chronograph for $450. The Longines Navigation Big Eye is one of the brand's more traditional pilot watches, which may be why I love it so much. The first thing you'll notice about this watch is the Big Eye, the oversized chronograph register at 3 o'clock. While it offsets the dial a little bit, it's hard not to appreciate the utility of it on a chronograph. The case measures in at 41mm, making it very wearable for a chronograph. It comes on a calfskin leather strap that has a lot of pilot influence. And while it's offered in both titanium and stainless steel, the titanium model is my favorite. That's because of the dial in the titanium version. The Lagoon Blue dial, or Longines calls it petroleum, features an exaggerated sandblasted dial texture and Fotina hands and Arabic numerals. It's a fantastic package for a relatively affordable price at $3,850. So there we have it, guys, a list of some of the best chronographs on the market. Be sure to let me know what you think in the comments below. Were there any that I missed? Were there any that I added that shouldn't be there? And make sure to head over to wristenthusiast.com to see our list of 40 chronograph watches. Link is in the caption. And once again, if you like this content, please like and subscribe, and don't forget to turn on notifications. Until next time, I'm Craig Karger, and I'll catch you on the next one.